This training video is intended for use by first responders and focuses on helicopter landing zone safety, security, communications, and procedures for loading patients. This video has 6 chapters. Chapter 1 covers how to prepare a landing zone. Chapter 2 focuses on aircraft landing. Chapter 3 shows how to load patients. Chapter 4 covers aircraft departure. Chapter 5 details crash procedures. And finally, Chapter 6 presents special LZ considerations. Although the images and procedures in this video focus on Boston MedFlight, the same actions and procedures are applicable to any of the helicopter air ambulance services operating in Massachusetts. Helicopter air ambulance accident statistics show that landing zones, or LZs, are among the most hazardous environments for critical care flight teams. Proper management and adherence to safety protocols by first responders are essential to ensure safety for all. Through the efforts of local first responders, Massachusetts is fortunate to have several thousand pre-designated helicopter landing zones in towns across the Commonwealth. The LZ locations and local fire department communication frequencies are available to all helicopter air ambulances in Massachusetts. When requesting an air ambulance, use the town or city's pre-designated landing zone. Inform Boston MedFlight or another responding air ambulance communication center of the name of the LZ,
the LZ3 Fenn School on
the LZ number and description, such as high school parking lot.
Once we lift off and update the ETA.
If there is a need to land the helicopter in an undesignated LZ, such as a highway, provide the specific location description, for example, Route 495 South at exit 20, or provide the latitude and longitude coordinates. The LZ should be a minimum of 100 feet by 100 feet, with firm level ground, so you need to inspect for mud, ice, swampy areas or snow, sand and loose gravel. Avoid slopes or slanted ground if possible. If unavoidable, be sure to identify slopes that are excessive. An excessive slope is anything more than 10 degrees. Severe slopes reduce the distance between the rotor blades and the ground and can pose a hazard for anyone approaching the aircraft. Personnel should survey the LZ to remove loose debris and make note of obstructions that are in the ground
and you have a water tower to the west
and in the immediate area.
So let's just do a quick flight check. We'll check for obstructions. We'll move that net out of the way, and we'll just make sure the LZ is secure.
Including boulders, pipes, fences, trash barrels, posts, snow piles, sticks, swales, ruts, stone walls, poles, and especially wires. Although obstructions may be obvious to ground personnel, they may not be noticeable from the air. When possible, park apparatus adjacent to obstruction as a warning to the pilot. Proper communication through the chain of command is key to safety. Be sure to establish roles and responsibilities to ensure a safe LZ environment. Positive communication between the LZ command and the helicopter are also essential to a safe operation.
MedFlight just got confirmation that the LZ is secure at this time.
A helicopter can generate winds in excess of 100 miles per hour. Debris in the surrounding areas, such as trash, construction materials, tarps, sheet plastic, plywood, children's toys, or crime scene tape, can be picked up by rotor wash and become a projectile. To avoid a potential safety hazard, all debris must be either removed or secured prior to landing. Remember, a helicopter does not take off or land straight up and down. It needs a clear, angled approach corridor, preferably into the wind. Crowds or bystanders in proximity to the LZ must be controlled. All bystanders, particularly children, must be closely watched, as they can be unpredictable. There must be adequate personnel to prevent bystanders accessing the LZ by vehicle or by foot. During winter, firmly packed snow on level ground is preferred over ice. The pilot should be informed of fresh or loose snow. A few inches of fresh snow can create a whiteout condition when snow is whipped up by rotor wash. This can obstruct the pilot's vision and result in an aborted landing. A parking lot with excessive sand is also a hazard to the aircraft. A preferred alternative is a plowed but unsanded parking lot. Any fire apparatus should be positioned outside of the 100-foot by 100-foot LZ in a crisscross formation with headlights shining onto the LZ. All emergency lighting should be operating to help the pilot identify the LZ from a distance. As general procedure, high visibility flashing lights and headlights should be turned off once the pilot makes radio contact with the LZ command and indicates the LZ is in sight. The pilot may ask LZ command directly or through our communication center to keep headlights and other high visibility flashing lights on if certain lighting conditions and other circumstances exist. All vehicles must remain outside the 100-foot by 100-foot landing area. An aircraft should always be considered dangerous, whether the rotors are rotating or appear to be stopped. Vehicles near the LZ should not be in motion when the helicopter is on final approach or landing or preparing for liftoff. This concludes our chapter on preparing the LZ. You should now have a clear understanding of how to successfully prepare an LZ under any condition. Our next chapter covers the helicopter landing phase. This chapter focuses on aircraft landing. It includes LZ expectations, LZ security, and helicopter wave-off protocol. When the helicopter approaches the LZ, there are procedures that all personnel must adhere to. Effective communication is imperative for conducting a safe landing. When approaching the LZ, the aircraft personnel will make radio contact with the LZ command on the requesting fire department radio frequency to alert them of the ETA. If, for whatever reason, direct communication with the helicopter cannot be established, instructions can be relayed through fire dispatch and the responding air ambulance communication center. Ground personnel should abide by the landing safety procedures. Immediately upon arriving at the LZ, ground personnel should either remove or secure all potential debris. The helicopter always needs a clear angled approach corridor. The aircraft will typically approach the LZ heading into the wind and on an angled descent to the ground. The helicopter does not descend straight to the ground from a high altitude. Once the helicopter is hovering a few feet over the LZ, the helicopter pilot will turn the aircraft's nose toward the fire apparatus and ambulance. The pilot will then lower the helicopter to the ground. After landing, the crew will go to the patient. Never approach the helicopter or bring the patient to the helicopter without the crew's instruction. In many situations, the helicopter's rotor blades will continue turning throughout the ground phase of the patient pickup. This is an extremely hazardous environment, and no one should approach the helicopter without the direct instruction of a crew member. LZ security must always be maintained. Bystanders near the proximity of the LZ are unpredictable and must be controlled. The LZ command is responsible for maintaining security during landing, loading, and until after the departure of the aircraft. The area around the tail of the helicopter should be monitored because it is typically out of the pilot's sight, and the spinning tail rotor blades are closer to the ground in the back of the helicopter. If the LZ command sees a hazard in the LZ area, such as a person running or a car moving to the LZ, there are two simultaneous actions they must take. The LZ command must wave their hands over their head in the direction of the aircraft to alert the pilot of the hazard, while contacting the aircraft on fire department radio frequency, clearly stating, "Abort, abort, abort your landing." This concludes our chapter on air ambulance landing. Safety and communication are crucial elements in a successful aircraft landing. We have now covered LZ expectations, LZ security, and LZ wave-off protocol. Continue viewing for safety protocols on patient loading safety. This chapter focuses on patient loading procedures. If loading assistance is needed, a designated crew member will give a loading briefing to the loading personnel before moving to the aircraft.
Head back to the helicopter. We're going to go feet first towards the helicopter. We're going to watch for Kaylee the whole time. She's going to give us instructions as we get close. So we're going to stay outside of the rotors. We're going to go straight into the 3 o'clock position on the helicopter. Once we load, everybody's going to stay right there. Once we're done, we're going to help you guys come back out from away from the helicopter. Never walk towards the nose or towards the back, okay?
This briefing will include a reminder that all loose articles of clothing and helmets must be secured. It will also define and assign roles and summarize the loading plan. The Sikorsky S-76 and several helicopters flown by other operators in Massachusetts uses the board stretcher system. 4 fire department or EMS personnel are required to carry the patient on the board-type stretcher to the aircraft. 1 crew member acts as a nose guard, guarding the nose of the helicopter. No one should go behind this crew member toward the nose of the aircraft. When loading the patient into the S-76, a crew member will direct the loading from either the 9 or the 3 o'clock position of the helicopter through the side door. Once loading is complete, a crew member will escort the fire department or EMS load team under the rotor disc and away from the aircraft in the same direction from which they entered. A maximum of 4 fire department or EMS loaders can be used to assist loading the patient into the H-145 aircraft or other helicopters using a wheeled stretcher system. Depending on the patient's condition and the surface, at times less than 4 or no assistance will be needed for a wheeled stretcher. The crew will determine if assistance is required based on the size, acuity of the patient, and ground surface. The loading brief is completed by the crew member, which includes roles in reviewing the loading plan.
And once we get to the aircraft, follow me in. We're going to go to the back side. Kristen's going to direct us in. And once we get there, we're going to go head first into the back of the aircraft. We're going to make sure that this part is locked into the 2 hooks on the floor of the helicopter. Make sure any hats, if you have one on, or helmets, that your chin strap is on securely. Anything loose outside on your shirts needs to be tucked in so that it doesn't get under the rotor wash.
The loading approach direction of this aircraft is 9 o'clock or 3 o'clock. The patient is moved toward the aircraft feet first and then turned prior to going under the main rotor blades and loaded into the aircraft head first. A crew member will guard the tail of the aircraft. Never move behind the tail guard. Once the patient is at the aircraft, a crew member will escort the fire department or EMS load team under the rotor disc and away from the aircraft in the same direction from which they entered. There are 2 possible task assignments for the loading team. They may be instructed to lift the stretcher wheels or operate the stretcher trigger. These roles are assigned during the loading brief. This concludes our chapter on air ambulance patient loading. Close attention to the crew member's loading instructions and direction are crucial to a safe loading procedure. Continue viewing for safety protocols on air ambulance departure. Prior to departure, the LZ commander will reevaluate LZ security. Once the patient has been successfully loaded, all ground personnel must prepare for the aircraft departure. At this time, no one should reapproach the aircraft, and all personnel need to be in place away from the aircraft. Bystanders and vehicles must remain secured. The pilot will typically lift the helicopter into a hover a few feet above the ground to check that all systems are functioning properly. If the LZ is a confined space, the pilot will then turn the helicopter into the wind and lift straight up or slightly backwards until it is above all obstacles in the area. Finally, the pilot will transition to forward flight by lowering the nose of the helicopter and accelerating away from the LZ. This procedure can take a few minutes. However, this is normal and should not cause any alarm. Similar to landing, all ground personnel should expect hurricane-force winds coming from the aircraft during departure. Remember, while following these protocols during departure, security is always a main priority. This concludes our chapter on air ambulance departure. Continue viewing for safety protocols on crash procedures. While it's highly unlikely that the helicopter will have any problems during landing or departure, in the event of a crash, fire departments must be prepared for a post-crash fire and rescue. Fire personnel should be in full turnout gear with quick access to fire suppression equipment. Each aircraft is equipped with a liquid oxygen cylinder and 1 portable D-tank, both located in the patient's compartment. The liquid oxygen cylinder contains a maximum of 8 liters of liquid oxygen under pressure. The aircraft fuel tanks are located in the belly of all the aircraft. Helicopters can carry up to 250 gallons of Jet A fuel. If a crew member needs to be extricated, seatbelt systems are unlocked with a quarter turn of the buckle in either direction or cut away with a sharp knife. All fire rescue personnel should be familiar with operating helicopter doors to aid in extrication of crew members. Boston MedFlight helicopters use lead-acid batteries. located on the left side of the baggage compartment of the S-76 helicopter and behind the engines of the H-145 helicopter. Follow these guidelines in the event of a helicopter crash. Although crashes are unlikely, it is best to always be prepared and be aware of the locations of potential hazards inside the aircraft, as well as the means to extricate helicopter crew members. This concludes our chapter on crash procedures. Continue viewing for information on some other special considerations. This final chapter focuses on special considerations, including night landing, weather conditions, and highway landings. If a nighttime aircraft landing is required, there are a few things to keep in mind. All Massachusetts helicopter air ambulance pilots wear night vision goggles. Artificial lighting can be very distracting or even blinding to the pilot. LZ Command should be aware of high-intensity lights that may be in the LZ area. Make sure all vehicle emergency lights are always on to assist the helicopter in locating the LZ. However, if requested by the pilot, be ready to turn down or off the emergency lights. Do not point spotlights at the aircraft while in flight or landing. The aircraft can land on firmly packed snow LZs. However, the aircraft will not land in deep snow. The LZ must be inspected to ensure the landing is possible. If the LZ is found to be unsuitable, make arrangements for an alternate LZ, such as an adjacent parking lot, hospital helipad, or other pre-designated town LZ. Be advised when landing on or around snow, a large amount of snow will be blown around, causing whiteout conditions for ground personnel. If possible, avoid the use of a snow-covered LZ. If landing the aircraft on a highway, give the exact location to the MedFlight Communication Center. For example, Route 128 North at Exit 24, landing on northbound side. The traffic must be stopped prior to the aircraft's approach. Consider the possibility of stopping traffic on both sides of the highway, depending on the distance of the separation of the sides. Fire and police apparatus must be positioned under or near any large highway signs or wires, and the approaching aircraft must be notified of hazard. Media and onlookers are often interested in getting a better view of the helicopter. Sometimes this will include the use of drones to capture video of the helicopter landing or departing. Drones are an extreme hazard for helicopters. LZ Command must assure any drone near the LZ is securely on the ground before the helicopter begins its approach. Advise the pilot if a drone has been spotted in the area. This concludes our chapter on special considerations. You now have an understanding of night landing, weather conditions, and highway landings. This chapter concludes our training video series. This advanced training has focused on the proper procedures for safely executing a helicopter air ambulance landing zone event. After watching this video, you now have an understanding of the following: LZ safety and security, communications, procedures for loading patients, LZ expectations, LZ wave-off protocol, loading procedures for the board stretcher and wheeled stretcher systems, LZ departure, crash procedures, and special considerations, including night landing, weather conditions, and highway landings.